Right then, so today we're going to talk about energetic self-protection. So I guess first of all, I should say a couple of things about protection, because in most healing courses, you're going to have something about protection or self-protection. It's a pretty standard thing in most healing courses, and that's because it's a very important subject when you're a healer, to protect yourself from certain energies. And when I say energies here, I'm including emotional energy as well. So this lesson is really called energetic self-protection, and that includes all types of energies. But we're going to go over the basics of energetic self-protection in this particular lesson. But the thing I want to guess, the point I want to make here, I think, is that it's important to include energetic self-protection in any system of healing. That's for sure. And when we teach our golden energy system of energy healing, we're going to include self-protection exercises in that. Now, we've got 2 lessons of that coming up shortly, and that's going to include all sorts of methods of energy healing, with a large focus on hands healing, but we're going to include all different types of healing in there. And that's going to be like the AO method, you could say. However, and the reason why we're going to include self-protection exercises in there is because we want to teach that method to everyone. We want to teach it to the general public. We think that everybody should be using energy healing on themselves and on the people around them all the time. It's an underused skill in the mainstream of society. So that's why self-protection exercises are important to include in a system of healing. However, this is Network Healers, this course, and this is for people who are going to become part of a Network Healers hub, Network Healers clinic hub, or health flow. And something's a little bit different with Network Healers, because when you get to a certain point in spiritual evolution, you don't need to do self-protection exercises anymore. This is a thing that the higher mind actually learns through the journey of spiritual evolution. So this is why many people out there in the world are not bothered by energetic issues. I mean, I think that, that does depend on the issue. Emotional. I think everyone is affected by emotional transfers, but many other types of energetic stuff that's going on, people are not necessarily bothered by. And that's because their higher minds are just doing it automatically without them knowing it. But the higher mind does have to learn that at some point in the spiritual evolution journey, which is why it's important to include it in systems of energy healing. But we're not going to include a system of self-protection for network healers. That's what I'm trying to say here. Because everybody that's going through network healers is going through Kundalini awakening and self-realization. And at that point, your higher mind, it takes care of it completely. There's no need to do any self-protection exercises. So what we're doing in this lesson is that we're going to go through the basics of energetic self-protection, just so that you become aware of it. And also we're going to go through some exercises that you can try it on yourself, and you can use it if you want, but you don't need to. But it's really important for teaching other people. So the exercises we're going to do at the end of this lesson, really, it's for teaching other people that are struggling with certain energetic problems, energy problems, subtle energy issues. So that's what I wanted to start with. Any questions so far? Yes, absolutely. So these are basic tools of the trade for a higher mind, but the higher mind does have to go through a learning process of learning it. So if you think about the evolution of the soul, all the way from tiny animals, all the way through the animal species and into humans and into the human journey, it's a whole process of learning for the higher mind. The higher mind has to learn everything, pretty much. And so quite a lot of the things that we take for granted that our higher minds just seem to know, that didn't just come along by accident. That came through a long history of learning of that higher mind. Millions and millions and millions of incarnations. So pretty much, so everything that our higher minds know, they have learned at some point in the past, which is why these energetic self-protection techniques are known to a higher mind of a certain development level, but not known before that. So the higher minds do actually have to learn it. So it's important to include it in systems of energy healing because the higher mind in question may not have learnt it yet. And you can see out there lots of people who are struggling with basic self-protection. You know, all the stories that you hear of possessions and things like that, when spirits are possessing people or hanging around and causing trouble and causing, you know, issues in people's lives. All that is basic energetic self-protection. And the higher mind in question, who is being harassed or is being accosted, hasn't yet learned, is an unconscious, or sorry, a sleeping higher mind, and hasn't yet learned those energetic self-protection techniques. Okay, great. Now that's a good thing to bring up, because that's something I forgot to mention as well. So basically, and I'm going to go through all a few different types of protection in this lesson. However, one thing I did want to mention was we've been talking about it in terms of being a healer, but this applies to many professions, all sorts of professions. And in fact, this lesson itself is based on a lesson that we actually give to social workers and well, health and social care staff is part of that course as well. So it's very important to understand, for anybody who is helping others in some way, it's very important to understand, because the same thing applies. Now, in healing, you're consciously giving energy to somebody, but at the end of the day, you're making connections with people, and energy can be transferred in some way. And that's the same thing if you're in health and social care, or you're a social worker, or a medical staff or anything like that. You're making connections with people, and you can actually transfer energies between you without knowing. So that goes for any of these types of professions. But yeah, I will go through a few different types of energy transfers and explain how they transfer and the things that we've got to watch out for. Okay, so emotional and energetic self-protection. So the first thing we've got to talk about is energy, of course. Now, we have talked about energy a lot now and the different types of energy. In fact, in the next lesson, next week, we're going to talk about the structure of energy, and we're going to talk about the different structure, the atomic structure of material energy. We're going to talk about subtle energy, or chi, or prana, whatever you want to call it. And we're going to talk about the structure of that and how it's actually a type of magnetic field. And this subtle energy or magnetic field, different types of magnetic field, is actually what gets transferred between people. So we've talked a lot about this before, haven't we? And we've even done the lesson on the collective mind and how energy can be transferred. So you know what what I find quite remarkable is that the idea of transferring energy between people, or energy being around us all the time, is, I think, known by most people in some sort of way, even if it's in a subconscious way, you know, because these things exist in our language. You know, people are always using the word energy, or I can feel your energy, or I can feel the energy in the room, or sometimes they call it atmosphere. But, you know, these things exist in our language, and it's not going to be much of a stretch for people to believe that there is an actual energy that's transferred between people. When it comes out into science and it becomes mainstream wide type knowledge, scientific knowledge, it's not going to be much of a stretch for people to understand, because they're going to get it immediately, because people talk that way. So it's not going to be it's not going to be much resistance in the mainstream, I would say. And the word empath exists already. People already kind of know that, you know, a lot of people pick up on other people's emotions, and it's called an empath. And not, you know, science doesn't know how that happens. There are some theories. There are some theories floating around, of course. One of them is pheromones and things like that, or you know, the transfer of chemicals somehow between people. But you know, that's not a very agreed upon theory, and no one really has detected it or knows exactly how it works. And also there's other theories about, you know, recognizing facial recognition, triggering off things in the brain, you know, that sort of thing. But you know, the reality is it's probably going to be a mixture of things. But when science actually finds this energy, finds evidence for this energy, it's not going to be much of a surprise to people. So let's just have a quick reminder about the idea of networks. So you've seen this before and this idea before. I always come back to this idea of plants because this just shows that networks exist in nature already. You know, the networks underground that plants communicate with. This is a recent discovery in science over the last 10, 15 years or so, that plants actually communicate with each other underground through what they call mycelium networks. These are fungal networks, networks of funguses that grow underground, and they connect the roots of plants. Now, if you think about what a fungal network is, it's actually a network of tubes. A mycelium network is just lots of fine filaments of fungus. If you ever dig up the ground, sometimes you can even see them. They're very, very fine, but they're lots of little fine tubes that are connecting everything. And this is what actually connects the roots of plants and trees. And there's a lot of communication that's going on. You know, there's been evidence found that water and other nutrients can actually be sent from plant to plant, especially from let's say a mother tree and to the siblings of that mother tree. Because obviously seeds go out and siblings form, and the tree spreads, and you know the parent tree can actually push nutrients to those newly forming trees, you know, things like that. So this is just an example of networks in nature. So it's very important to remember that. Now, remember what I said there about the tubes, the rhizome, sorry, the mycelium network tubes running underground. Now let's talk about the idea of the collective mind. So we've talked about the collective mind a lot already. We had the lesson on the collective mind and showed how the collective mind is formed around the planet, and it's a network of mind connecting every individual in the network. So think of it in this sort of pattern where each one of these hexagons is a different individual. But if you put these individuals together, each little individual mind, plonk them together, you've got a network of mind. And you can even call it you can even call it one mind if you want. And this leads to another example of this sort of thing happening in nature already. The hive system. This is how a lot of insects function, as a sort of collective system. I wouldn't call it mind, let's say, but it is a collective system, and all the individuals in the group function together. They communicate together and function together as one organism. So you could say that the collective mind is a little bit like that. So this is just to show that this happens in nature already. And again, you know, when science comes out with this, it's not going to be much of a stretch. I mean, it might be a bit of a step, but you know, this happens in nature already. So in terms of the biology of it, it's not that much of a step. Once subtle energy has been discovered and proved, then it's not much of a step to suggest this, basically. So this network of mind is constantly transferring things back and forth between individuals. Now here we're going to expand the definition of mind here, because the collective mind is what connects us all. But there's all sorts of things that can be transferred between individuals in the collective mind. So energetic transfer is just part of the things that can be transferred in the collective mind. So I know that when we usually think of mind, we think of thoughts and thinking. Well, actually, you know, transfer of thoughts is actually still transfer of energy, isn't it? You know, telepathy, for example, those thoughts have to be coded in information and in subtle energy, and then that has to be transferred. So really, all transfers in the collective mind are made of energy, hence energetic self-protection that we're going to talk about. So as part of that, let's talk about emotional connections first. Any questions so far, by the way? Okay, so let's talk about emotional connections, because one of the things with the most impact that gets transferred between different people is emotional energy. Now, we've talked about emotional energy quite a lot. We've talked about the emotional cycle quite a lot, especially in the self-healing lessons. In the emotional layer lesson, we talked about the emotional cycle And we also probably talked about it in the karma lesson, how emotional energy is produced by the thinking patterns in the mind, and then that emotional energy circulates around the energy body until it finds a particular chakra that it is coded for. And that emotional energy was created with a particular programming designed for one of the emotion chakras. Let's say it's the heart chakra. It finds the heart chakra in the energy body. It activates the heart chakra. The heart chakra then activates the emotional response in the material body. That's the limbic system and the endocrine system and the nervous system. And that's what we feel as that emotion. So that emotional energy is getting produced. It's flying around the energy body. And if there's too much of it, it actually can come out of the energy body. It can be transferred to other people. And then that's what an empath is. When you are feeling somebody else's emotion, that emotional energy gets transferred through the collective mind, and it can go into you or whoever. It can go into somebody, circulate around their energy body, and it finds the heart chakra and activates it with the same emotion that the other person was feeling. And that's because we're the same species, of course, and the coding or the programming is the same. And actually, I think that is cross species as well. I mean, there's going to be like if a species is close to another species, then there's going to be some similarity. I mean, I've felt, for example, and I'm sure you guys have too, I've felt emotions from animals very often as well. So if the anatomy is close enough, then it's going to activate as well. If once the anatomy is too far away in evolution, then it's not going to work. So let's talk about the negative side of this, because fear, anger, and hatred are probably, you could say, some of the worst of the negative emotions. And these emotions are very prevalent today, aren't they? We all know that there's a lot. It seems like there's a growing amount of fear, hatred, and anger in our society now. Now we know differently, but we know that because of the global awakening, this is a necessary thing, and it's just a surface level thing, and it's all going to change with the global awakening. However, when you look out of the window into the world, you see a lot of fear, anger, and hatred, which is growing. And a lot of this fear, anger, and hatred is actually getting transferred through the collective mind. And social media has amplified this, of course, but you can tell that fear, anger, and hatred just spreads like wildfire through the collective mind. It is so contagious. And that's because negative emotions travel through the collective mind much quicker than positive emotions. And that is just a survival thing. If you can imagine back in the day when we were small animals like meerkats, for example, when a meerkat lookout is looking out for danger, and when it sees danger, the emotional response that it feels gets transferred super quickly to the rest of the network, to the rest of the family or the social group of meerkats. And and that keeps the individuals alive, that keeps the society alive for longer. So it's a survival thing. That's why the negative emotions will travel faster than the positive ones. So imagine these negative emotions flying through the collective mind, and the darker colors are symbolizing the negative emotions here. So this is what happens in the collective mind when too much of this stuff is spreading around. It spreads and spreads and spreads like wildfire. And you can see this happening. And like I said, social media amplifies it even more. But it spreads through the collective mind and can be unstoppable sometimes. And by the way, just as an aside there, social media is not a bad thing. It's not a good thing either. It's just technology, isn't it? It's human beings that are the root cause of anything. So really, I think that social media can be used in the opposite way if they could just change the algorithms to prioritize positive things. Then that might sort out quite a lot of issues. But of course, at the moment, the algorithm prioritizes watch time. So the algorithm, that means the algorithm prioritizes negative stuff more than positive stuff, just because that's human nature to focus more on the negative. Anyway, it's another story, isn't it? Any questions so far? Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of fallout from COVID and a lot of anger that is set in, and it's almost made people angrier in general. But you could, whether that's COVID or COVID's part of it, but you could also bring that back to the dip before the global awakening as well. And COVID is part of that. And maybe, COVID and other things that are going on in the world is part of that sliding downwards into oblivion, or what looks like oblivion, or crash, crash, the society crashing and burning. That's what it looks like, and it's all part of that, isn't it? But then we've got to remember, it's going to, there's some tough times to come, but then afterwards it's going to explode with awareness as well. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It does look like people have got themselves in a state of fear and anger and from COVID, and haven't gone back up again. Right then, so how do emotions actually travel through the collective mind? Because there's some different methods of travel. So if you can imagine the collective mind, the fabric of the collective mind, what does it look like? So you can actually see the collective mind. Now, it doesn't look exactly like this. This is just a diagrammatical representation, of course, but you can actually see the collective mind if you focus on it. Now, to focus on it, I would say start with golden energy, trying to see golden energy in your surroundings. If you look at a black background and you try and focus on the space in between your eyes and that black background, you will see a golden fuzzy haze. Now that's golden energy, which is everywhere. That's just a type of magnetic field. It's all the frequencies of energy put together, and that's what we ingest through our chakras, by the way, when we're breathing. But what you want to do is try and focus more and more on that golden energy. By the way, this isn't an exercise of the lesson or anything. I'm just saying, if you're interested and want to try and see what I'm talking about, you can actually start to become aware of a little fabric in there. First of all, you start to see a golden haze, but then you start to see little crisscross patterns in there, little fabrics. Sometimes you really got to stare for a long time and practice, but you will eventually see this little fabric. And what you're seeing there is what I call tubules. Now, I'm calling them that because you get tubules in biology as well. And tubules are like what they sound. They're tubes, tiny fine tubes in the collective mind. Now go back to the idea of the fungal networks and all those little fine tubes connecting everything underneath the soil, in the soil. It's a little bit similar to that, but it's everywhere around you. You've got this patchwork of fine tubules, and emotional energy can fly through there quite quickly, but it's still quite a short range thing. These tiny fibers are like a very short range thing, and I'll talk more about that in a second. But the other, if you think about these tubules, tiny ones, well, actually there are bigger ones as well. So that sort of patchwork thing is just the very small ones. Then you've got slightly bigger ones, and then slightly bigger ones, and then even bigger ones, and then you've got really massive ones as well. And the really massive ones are things like ley lines. Now, everyone's heard of ley lines, haven't they? Connecting certain points on the planet. And energetically speaking, in the collective mind, ley lines are massive highways. Now, we've talked about that in the collective mind, haven't we? These big highways where information is zooming back and forth through these big tubes. But it's the same structure. There's just tubes are all different sizes in the collective mind, and they have different purposes. So going back to the fabric of the fine, when you see the fabric and you see those little fine fibers or tiny tubules, well, this is when, let's say, an emotional energy comes out as a cloud. Because, and you can see this sometimes, and you can certainly feel it. and you feel it coming out from somebody sometimes, and it hits you like a wave, and it feels, not to put a too fine a point on it, it feels disgusting. It feels horrible. It's not a nice feeling. And then if you ingest it, then you get that tinge of the emotion that created it. Now, this stuff can come out of people when they're feeling a negative emotion, but it sticks around for a fair bit of time as well. This stuff gets in everything, and this is the stuff that gets stuck in the fabric of buildings and things like that, and ground, and and structures, and it gets stuck everywhere. And you can feel this stuff as a cloud sometimes, and that the person who produced it may have been long gone. You can be walking down the road or walking down a path, and suddenly you go through an area of negative emotional energy, and you can feel it is horrible. You have to walk through it, and it's just like a cloud that's hanging around. And that could have been produced the day before or a week before, or whatever. Sometimes it can hang around for quite some time. But it's fairly local. It's fairly local to where it was produced. This stuff doesn't travel that far because it's going through those little fine tubules, the patchwork, the little network, very, very tiny. Now, it can also go through what we call chakra cords, and we've talked about chakra cords a lot already, haven't we? And a chakra cord connects to different people through the collective mind, through tubules, but through bigger ones. So if you imagine, we've just talked about those tiny, tiny, fine patchwork ones. Well, chakra cords are probably about that sort of size, or they're pretty much the size of the chakra opening. The biggest one is the sacral. The sacral is about that sort of size. The throat chakra is probably the smallest one, quite small, but around about that sort of size. And these run through tubules or tubes in the collective mind. And this can go much further. This can go far further than the cloud one. And because this is actually sending it, this evolved for a purpose. This evolved to transfer emotional energy from person to person. This is the survival adaptation I was talking about earlier. This is designed by nature to happen. It's a form of communication between people, isn't it? Emotional communication between people. And it happens a little bit like this. So two people's chakra system become connected to each other through chakra cords. The front connects with the front, and the back connects with the back. And then emotional energy is transferred through both of those chakra cords, the front and the back. Now, imagine I've just drawn the throat chakra there, but all of the chakras do connect between people at the same time. So we have got chakra connections with multiple people at the same time. And for the people that are close to us in our lives, it's all the time. They are permanently connected because it's very tricky sometimes to remove them. You have to work quite hard to remove them. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on. But, family members, for example, are just going to have these connections constantly connected, basically. All the emotion chakras. Just as another aside here, the brow chakra, before we move on, the brow chakra, as we know, because we did the telepathy experiments, is a chakra that is designed for long-range communication. So the emotional energy can be transferred quite a distance in the collective mind, but at some point it becomes ineffective, and then you've got to move to telepathic communication. And the brow chakra has evolved to send it over very long periods of time, and it encodes it in a different type of information, which allows it to travel further. And the brow chakra cord is a cord that's designed for long-range communication. So it's built slightly differently to the other chakra cords. So just going back to the cloud method, now this can be ingested into your energy body as well. So this is not through a chakra cord, it's not coming directly from somebody. It was produced by somebody, but it's just a cloud. Let's say you're walking through it in your morning walk, and then suddenly it's coming in through your chakras, and you feel the low frequency negative tinge of it, and then it activates one of your chakras, then you suddenly start feeling a negative emotion. And quite often you might think it's your emotion, and especially if you don't feel it energetically, if you don't feel the substance of it, you might just start feeling a negative emotion, and you might think it's yours. That is the default setting for most people. They assume that it's their emotion. Of course you would, wouldn't you? And quite often it gets mixed in with your own triggers as well. So somebody is just walking along the road, they suddenly get an emotion, and it sparks off some of their thinking patterns in the mind, and it gets mixed in with their own emotional cycle. So naturally they think it's theirs, when actually it came from somebody else. Okay, go on. Yes, 100%. Yeah, you can hear it in. You sound surprised. Yeah, absolutely. So there's two ways that you can hear what's in the collective mind. And the first is the one that you've just described. You can hear energy. So there are lots of different ways of sensing energy, as we all know, and you can see it, you can feel it, you can hear it as well. And an example here is sometimes tinnitus is actually you hearing the brow chakra, which is spinning. And because there's a channel in the energy body from the brow chakra to the ears, and sometimes it can get translated into a sound, and that's movement of energy. It's the brow chakra spinning mechanism, but you're hearing it. So if you imagine that happening, but actually you're hearing the movements in the collective mind, then you can get all sorts of different types of noises, because the collective mind, as we know, is dynamic. It's not static. It changes constantly, especially through the night. So you might be hearing lots of different movements of energy going on in the collective mind. And the other way, just to mention it, the other way is sometimes you can hear the astral dimensions. And when you're hearing the astral dimensions, what you're doing is that well, it can be various things, but a very common one is that you're downloading fragments of people's dreams, or you're downloading fragments of people's conversations in the astral. And sometimes you can hear the very low chatter that's going on, and it's an actual astral hearing. Quite often I used to hear this, and I still do sometimes. I used to hear it quite often just before waking, in the moment just before waking up in the mornings, and you can just hear constant voices chattering, and that's the astral dimensions basically. And people can hear all sorts of things from the astral dimensions, and quite often it gets misdiagnosed for other things, mental health conditions, things like that. But I should also say, I guess, that hearing voices is not always the astral dimensions. That can be caused by other things as well. Right, so that was emotional energy. Now we'll talk about what to do about it a bit later on in the lesson. But that was emotional energy transfer. Now the next thing is drainage and depletion. So sometimes you can wake up in the morning, and this is designed for teaching people, and this is designed for really the altruistic professions that are always helping other people. Healers are part of that, but there's lots of other professions like that, of course. And quite often you can wake up in the morning and you can be feeling good and lots of energy. And then when you finish the day, you're absolutely exhausted. Even more so, sometimes you haven't even done anything and you're absolutely exhausted. And other times you may even wake like this. Some people are waking in this state as well. Now, there could be many causes for this type of tiredness and depletion. There's many causes of chronic fatigue, for example. However, it might be a very common cause is depletion. Depletion is a very common cause, especially in the altruistic professions. Now, this is a massive thing in healing circles, of course, and any system of healing teaches people how to protect themselves from depletion. And this is energy depletion, just a general loss of energy, an uncontrollable loss of your own energy. So how does that actually work? And by the way, this happens so much when people don't know about this subject. You know, in the course that we run for the council, this is probably one of the most this concept is probably one of the most, or the most people respond to this particular concept. Out of all our self-healing concepts, this is the one that sparks people up. They're going, yes, this is happening to me. And they recognize it straight away. And unless you know that it's happening, it just, it's very uncontrollable. So just simply speaking, before we're not going to go into the actual anatomy of it, because we're going to do lessons of anatomy starting next week. But imagine you got a tank of energy, and here now we're talking golden energy. We're not talking emotional energy or any other type of energy. We're not talking about healing energy. We're talking about golden energy. And we know now that golden energy is important for creating ATP energy in the material body. That's what powers the material body, ATP energy. That's a molecule, by the way. That's material energy. But golden energy is super important for creating that ATP energy. So you need to have a constant supply, which is why we ingest it through our chakras. Now imagine you've got a tank of energy, and you have actually got a tank of energy. You've got 3 storage areas in the energy body, and the chakras are constantly pumping it around the energy body. Now, if the chakras are always open, then all sorts of energy can get transferred from person to person. So we know about the emotional energy now, but golden energy can also be transferred from person to person. And this is what causes depletion, because if the chakras are always open, your golden energy will be getting drained if it's connected to somebody who is needing it. If that person is very blocked up and depleted themselves, they're going to be grabbing as much as they can. It's not their fault. They don't know it's happening either. But there could be a one-way travel of golden energy from you to the person that you are trying to help. And this tank is just going to get more and more depleted if you don't know about it, because the chakras stay open and the tank gets lower and lower and lower until you get to a certain point where you go through burnout. Now, this is very common in some of the professions, especially at the council, especially of the people we're teaching there. There's many cases of burnout, and it's got to do with a lot of things, of course, the pressures of the job and everything, but depletion is going to be very high up there on the list of reasons why people are getting burnt out, because they don't know that this is happening. When you're helping other people, you have to make emotional connections with them. You have to open your emotional connections. So if you imagine a healer or anybody else who's in one of these professions, they've got a host of people they're dealing with, whether they're clients or healing partners or whatever, and they have got emotional connections with all of these people. And their chakras are open all the time because they're not aware of this concept. So imagine that your energy is going out to multiple people all the time. And it doesn't stop when you get home from work either. It carries on through the evening and through the night. And it ends up draining people completely. And it's all about supply and demand, really. Are your chakras open or closed? That's what we want to be asking ourselves. And remember, I just want to bring the concept back in of the network healers and remind you guys that you guys don't have to worry about this yourselves, because your higher minds are doing it. Now, if you have ever experienced this, the reason is that your higher mind is teaching you something, is that the higher mind is just making you aware of something or giving you that experience. But for you guys, your higher mind will be doing this all on your own. Okay, let's stop for a break now before we carry on and do the practical exercises. Well, actually, no. First of all, any questions about what I've said there before we stop for a break? Yeah, absolutely. So it's not a strange thing to say. And I've noticed exactly the same sometimes. And there's going to be various different things that's happening all at once in that situation. The first thing that you can say is that your brain is activating the emotional response in the body as well. That's one thing that can happen, of course. But there is something else that's going on there as well. And that is the fact that, and I've noticed this in many instances, that when somebody creates a certain piece of work, an energy goes with it and it gets stored in the collective mind. And then when people access that piece of work, you download the energy of some of the energy that was used to create it in the first place. Now, I've noticed it with loads of different things, especially things like artwork and stuff, and also videos. Videos, whether it's film or YouTube stuff or people making videos. And I've certainly noticed the different types of energies that you download depending on what you're watching, which has led me to see that certain films are not as destructive as people think they are because of the intent that was used in creating that film. But then other types of telly are very destructive because of the intent behind it. Do you see what I mean? So whatever the intent behind it gets stored in the collective mind, and you actually download it as well. So yeah, it's definitely something that happens, Jules. Mm. Yeah, that's a very good point to make. And so that's like a higher mind message. So that's something else that can be happening as well, isn't it? An actual intuitive message coming through, making you feel a certain way. Yeah, absolutely. By the way, there is something else to be said for that as well. And that is that you do go through a period, through the Kundalini phase, especially, you go through a period of instability, especially in the heart area, especially when we're talking about sentiment and love and things like that. It goes a bit haywire for a while, and that's actually the changing of the heart chakra from green to deep electric blue color. And yeah, all the emotions tend to go a little bit wild at that time as well. But it is a phase, and it does stabilize. Right, let's crack on then, shall we? Hopefully everybody is there. I can't see everybody quite now, but I guess we should crack on. Right then. So where were we at? Supply and demand, that's where we were. Are your chakras open or closed? Because that matters, whatever the type of energy is being transferred, whether it's emotional energy or whether it's golden energy. So let's talk about practical exercises now. And this is part of the assignment today as well, to just give some of these exercises a go. Now we can, we'll give them a go now as well. But then if you could take it away and try them out a little bit more, and then write a little report on your findings. And also part of the assignment is also to write something about your experiences in the past with energetic self-protection, or the lack of, whatever you can think of in your own experience, in your own memories, to give us a bit of a taste into your own personal experience. Now, as we go through these exercises, let's remember who they are for exactly. Now, you guys can play around with these if you want and try them out, and you are doing them all the time naturally. Your high mind is, but maybe you'll want to do them consciously for a while. It's completely up to you. But the thing I want to say here is that you don't need to do these. This is really what we want to be teaching to people. And as a healer, you're going to have lots of healing partners, and many of them may be suffering from issues with energetic protection. So this is something that we want to be teaching to people, to manage their own connections, especially if they're in an altruistic profession. However, it does apply to everybody as well, because families have emotional connections, and everybody is suffering from this in some way. And in many situations, in many families, there's one person who is taking more energy without knowing it from somebody else, and one family member is getting depleted and not knowing about it. So this is happening all the time. And you know that when we get depleted, we get vulnerable to all sorts of other things as well. So this is just the very beginning of what can happen when you get depleted, because you get vulnerable to illness and ill health and other viruses, magnetic viruses as well. We talked about that in the collective mind. By the way, just as another aside here, there are some other types of things in the astral that we have to protect ourselves from, like entities and things like that. We're not covering that in this lesson. We'll talk about that in the the second astral lesson, or sorry, the second collective mind lesson, which is about the astral. So there's 3 exercises that we want to focus on to teach people. And I know that some of you will know these pretty well already, because you've got a lot of healing experience and self-healing experience. But there's three that we want to teach people as standard: building defenses, neutralizing negativity, and closing chakras. Now, this first one, building defenses. Let's start with that one. So this is for people who need to build their chakra defenses. Now, if you can imagine the chakras, the emotion chakras have all got a little door on them. They've got a closing mechanism, and we talked about this in the collective mind, didn't we, when we were doing the telepathy experiment, the little door. Now, each one of those chakras got a little door, open and closes. If somebody is not in control of that door, it can get jammed open, or sometimes it can get jammed closed, to be honest. But let's say it's jammed open and it's not strong enough to close. It needs to be built up. It's like a muscle, let's say. You think of this door like little muscles that are opening and closing. If the muscles are weak, then it's not going to do its job properly. So you can build up those defenses. You can build up those chakras. And the way you do this is through this particular exercise. And it's using the breath. So, and there's one for each color, each chakra color. So this is not like chakra breathing, by the way. You may think this is a little bit like chakra breathing because we're using the color, but it's not exactly the same. It's just using the same colors as the chakras. So for this, we want to, on the in-breath. Now, I think you're all used to doing breath work, aren't you? So I won't go through the technique of the breathing exercise, but if you want, because we've done that before in one of the previous lessons, and if you want to remind yourself, I think I added a video on golden basic yogic breathing and golden energy yogic breathing on one of the previous lessons, so you can remind yourself if you're not used to doing breath work. But for this, you just want to use that basic breathing rhythm, and you want to ingest a color. So on the in-breath, belly comes out, chest comes out, all the way to the top. That's the breathing. Now, on that in-breath, you want to visualize red energy coming in from everywhere and filling your whole energy body with red energy. And then on the out-breath, the air is coming down very, very slowly, but your red energy is firing out in all directions. Now, in reality, make it go out to about 20 odd meters outside of you. So it's more than what this diagram says, but expand it as far as you like, to be honest with you. You know, what this is actually doing is you're building the root chakra's defense, and you're expanding the level of control over the collective mind that you have. Because a well-developed, spiritually evolved higher mind has full control of the whole of the collective mind in its vicinity. And if it doesn't want it, nothing can come in to that vicinity. So you can build yourself a shield wall around you. This is what the higher mind does very often. You can build like a massive shield wall, and nothing can come into that area. And this is what higher minds do all the time. And in fact, you know, the more developed a higher mind gets, the bigger that area gets. And in fact, its sphere of influence starts to become huge. So that's what we're doing here. We're building the root chakra defenses, but we're also building this sphere around ourselves of control, sphere of influence around you. So that's for the root chakra. We do that once or however many times you like. In this exercise, we just do it once on the root chakra, let's say, and then you move to the sacral, and you do it with orange exercise, orange. So on the in-breath, and orange energy is pouring inside you until your whole energy body is full of orange energy. And then on the out-breath, out to that sphere of influence, 20, 30 meters, whatever you like. That's in the visualization. And then you do the same for the yellow color of the solar plexus. And then you do the same for the green color of the heart chakra, bearing in mind that you guys actually have now got a electric blue heart chakra. And then you do it for the throat chakra, light blue color. So do you guys want to give that a quick go and see if you've got any questions after that? So you're going to do it 5 times, one with each of the colors, basically red, orange, yellow, green, and blue. Or in the heart one, if you want to do electric blue, it's completely up to you. Any questions about that before you give that a go? Make sure you keep a nice vertical spine for this one, and fill your lungs with as much air as possible on the in-breath, and empty it as far as you can out on the out-breath. And it's going to go quite quickly because there's going to be one breath of one color and then straight on to the next one of the next color. Okay, give that a go. Okay, I can't see everybody. I hope I'm not interrupting anyone, but I think everyone's finished. So, any questions about that? That fairly easy enough for everybody, or did anyone struggle with that, or got any questions? Well, it applies to everybody, let's say. But the point is that quite a lot of people out there don't need to do it because their high minds are doing it automatically. And certainly, if you're going through the Kundalini awakening and self-realization, that's automatically you know that soul has got to that point ages ago, so they don't actually need to do these exercises. But it can be very difficult to tell, and sometimes somebody's higher mind will give them problems until their lower mind becomes aware of it, and it's like a learning process for the lower mind. And then after that, their high mind will take care of it normally. Yes. So the answer is yes, but that is the next exercise that we're actually going to do. So no, that's good. But basically, this one here, if you can imagine, this one here is really just for building the defenses and building the chakras up and building the level of control you have in the collective mind around you. And then the next one, you're going to use that control. So this is for creating that sphere of influence around you. And yes, you can include a whole village in that. And then the next one you can use to actually do something about these things. So the next one is called neutralizing negativity. And this is a very similar exercise, but we're going to do it with a different color, and we're going to use it with a different intent. So the last one was, the intent was to build up the chakras, the strength of the chakras. This one, the intent is actually to neutralize anything negative anywhere within your sphere of influence. So it's exactly the same, but you're going to do it with white energy. And this time, as you expand that energy out in all directions, all the way to the edges of your sphere of experience, this time also form the intent that any negative energy in there is going to be evaporated. It's going to be completely neutralized. So nothing negative can exist in that personal space of yours. Now, if you want to go even further, you can imagine that if there are spirit entities or anything existing in that space, they just get pushed out. They get pushed out of your sphere of influence, so nothing can come in that is that you don't want in there, if you want to go further. But at a basic level, anything negative, like negative emotional energy or anything that has a negative quality to it, just evaporates. You can include magnetic viruses in this as well. You can just evaporate them like that. So yeah, any questions about that one? We'll give that a go. We'll do this with say just 5 breaths of doing the same thing. Any questions? That's right. So, and same with the last one. Actually, with the last one, you don't breathe it through a chakra. You that red or whatever colored energy is just pouring in from all directions and then expanding out on the out breath. And it's the same with this one. Just white energy, just coming in from all directions, and then on the out breath, out into the sphere. And by the way, you can do this for very large areas as well. The more practice you get, or let's say the more practice a higher mind gets, the more spiritually developed a higher mind gets, the bigger their sphere of influence can actually travel. So, and this energy, we can go even further. This energy can actually travel. You can send it as well. It doesn't have to go out in a sphere of influence. It can actually be sent as well. But anyway, that's another story. Let's do that. And do it for about 5 breaths or so, and then come back. Okay, there we go. I hope that my breathing is not being picked up by my microphone there, because that would have been a bit unnerving. A load of heavy breathing coming through. No, good. Sudden thought halfway through. All right, any questions about that? No, that's okay. So So I think that is just people's different breathing rates or rhythms. It doesn't matter how fast you do it, really. And also with the basic yogic breathing, there's also a pause at the top of the breath and at the bottom of the breath. So you hold your breath for a moment or two at the bottom, at the top and the bottom. So that some people may be pausing for longer, and some people may have different sized lungs as well. So I've always noticed that when I'm teaching breath work, is that people are finishing at vastly different times, to be honest with you. So no, I wouldn't worry about it. But you can also experiment yourself. If you're doing breath work, you can also experiment yourself with slowing the breath down or speeding it up slightly, and pausing for longer periods of time at the top of the breath and the bottom of the breath. You get different effects from doing different things. Yeah, and another thing to mention about this this exercise is that when we say our high mind is doing it on its own, that is a form of non-intention. And we're going to talk about non-intention healing in the next energy healing lesson. And what we're teaching people here is doing it with intention. So when we teach somebody to do a visualization and they're doing this energy exercise, they're doing it with intention. They're forming the intention to do it. So the lower mind is doing it. And when your high mind does it does it without your intention. You don't even, the lower mind doesn't even know it's happening. The same thing's happening, but your high mind's doing it. And that's what we call non-intention rather than intention. And I'm just saying that because it links in with the energy healing lesson that we're going to learn about non-intention soon. And that's how network healers work, with non-intention healing. But that's another story for the next energy healing lesson. Any other questions or comments about that before I move on to the next one? Closing chakras. This is where we actually start to take control of our chakras, which is one of the most important things that we can do with self-protection. So this is a very easy exercise to teach people. Now, again, I'm going to repeat, this is not something that we're trying to teach you to do as healers. This is something that a healer should be teaching other people to do. And it is something that we teach in our courses, courses for the general public, and also for altruistic professions like health and social care staff. So we think about our chakras as a door. It's very easy to use the metaphor of a door. Now, we don't actually have to individualize our chakras when we're doing this. You can close your chakras with a simple intention, and you can grab them all together in one simple intention. You know, many systems of healing have these types of exercises in. You know, I remember learning pranic healing when I was younger, and they get you to visualize all the chakra cords. They get you to bunch them all together into one big chunk, and they get you to visualize a big pair of scissors and chop the chakra cords. And that's just an example of, you know, different types. So it doesn't really matter what the visualization is, because it is the intention that actually matters. It's your intention behind the visualization. And you don't even need a visualization. You can do it in a mantra or anything you like, really. But this is a very simple, nice and easy, simple one, the door, because you open and close your door. It's a nice, easy metaphor to use. Now, as a healer, or anybody else who is working with people that are in distress, quite often you have to open your connections to people. And certainly in energy healing, you have to open your connections to people. You have to be fully open to them. Otherwise, you're just completely closed off. So when you meet somebody, let's say it's a healer, you're teaching somebody healing, when they start a healing session, you need to open your connections and connect your chakra cords to people. And then afterwards, you have to close your door. So at the start, you open your door, and at the end, you close your door. And this is just a simple visualization of closing the door. And then whenever you start again, you open your door again. And imagine that the door is different for every single person. So it's a different set of chakra cords, and it's a different door. You could even place the name of that person on the front door, if you like. Now, this has to be done constantly, unfortunately, because these chakra cords, they open up naturally. They get formed naturally. And if you leave them open, they become solid. And the more solid they are, the more difficult they are to close. And when you teach somebody to first start doing this, they will, if the chords are strong, they've been in place a long time, they will close it and then they will leave it, and then the chakra chords will jump back immediately. You have to constantly do it. And so it's good to do it as a routine, for example, in the morning and in the evening or something like that, to close all the connections down, especially if you're a practicing healer or if you're a practicing nurse or doctor or therapist or practitioner of any kind. It's always a good idea to, because this is, the more you can do it, the more you start managing your own connections, and then you can start choosing what connections you have open and what connections you have closed. So this comes from teaching lots of people this and getting lots of stories back from people, and noticing that in many people's lives, there are certain people in their life that they know that they've got this draining thing going on and that they need to start managing that emotional connection. But then another person over here might be completely fine and you don't need to keep closing the door to that person. So it's a case of knowing what's going on between your between the people in your life and the different emotional connections, and then managing them. And to answer your question, yes, the more you do it, the better, especially if you've only just started doing it, because they'll be very strong. And the problem is that as soon as you start thinking about that person, the chakra chords join immediately. And it's not only you. If they start thinking about you, the chakra chords will join to you immediately. So it's no good. Well, I mean, I put this as an example of doing it, in the morning, in the evening, only because we don't want to overload people. But it's true that, you can close your door, but then 5 minutes later, if that person is constantly thinking about you, it's going to open again. So quite often, if somebody is having a problem with somebody, then it's going to be a constant case of shutting it. But eventually, you will get used to it, and it will be automatic. So this is how the well, it's different for everybody in different stages of spiritual evolution. But let's say, for example, the higher mind is learning this for the first time. You have to teach the higher mind through the lower mind, because that's how the higher mind learns. So you teaching the lower mind to do these exercises, and then the higher mind cottons on and starts doing it automatically. So it's quite often the person will not need to do it for the rest of their lives, for example, or in another situation where the higher mind is doing it automatically, but is making it happen, is not doing it on purpose, just to make the lower mind aware of it. And then the lower mind gets aware of it, does it a few times, and then stops, and then the higher mind takes over. That's another situation that can happen. So yeah, everyone's kind of different with that. So it depends. It's case by case basis, really. But yeah, it constantly jumps back until you gain control of your chakra connections, and once that is built, generally speaking, once that chakra strength is built and you're used to doing it, it starts to become automatic, basically. Okay, so moving on. Lastly, just a quick note, and I've pretty much mentioned this already, to be honest with you, but the altruistic professions themselves are very important. It's very important for people to understand their emotional connections, but it's very important for people to be able to open their emotional connections, because there's no point in being in an altruistic profession, doesn't even need to be a profession. People are helping each other all the time, aren't they? But there's no point in trying to help somebody and being closed. Now, this came up in a lesson a while back. Somebody asked a question. If I close I have this person in my family who I really need to I really want to stay away from. They just cause me problems all the time. They asked, if I close all my chakras down all the time, am I going to come across as really closed off to them? And the answer is yes. You are going to come across as very cold and closed off, because your emotional connections are shut off. So this is not something that we want to be in a state of being closed all the time at all. We just need to manage the connections. And we need to understand the connections, because we have to be open to help anybody else We have to be open. We have to transfer energy to them. We have to transfer unconditional love to them. We have to have compassion for them. So we just have to be able to manage those connections, basically, and know when to shut them off and when to keep them open. All right. Well, very lastly, this is something that we want to be teaching people left, right, and center, to be honest with you. And that is, and I've mentioned it before, that is when we're feeling an emotion, the first question we should be asking ourselves is it my emotion? Has it come from me? Because, in most situations, people assume that it's their own emotion, and it gets mixed in with their own emotional cycle and their triggers and their conditioning patterns in their subconscious. But how many times, I mean, I don't know the answer to this, but what is the percentage of time